Devananda Pandit was a very great scholar. He was perfectly celibate. He had full control over all of his senses. He was very gentle. He was quite humble in many ways. And he exclusively studied and spoke from one scripture, and that was Srimad Bhagavatam. And in the town of Navadvip, he was the foremost of all reciters of Srimad Bhagavatam. In fact, of all the scholars in Navadvip, he was one of the most highly respected and highly esteemed. But there was one problem. He never received the mercy of the Vaishnavas. He never served the Vaishnavas. And therefore, he never developed a taste for devotional service. He had a strong longing in his heart for liberation. And therefore, he would explain the Srimad Bhagavatam in that way. One day, Lord Chaitanya and his associates were passing by the ashram where he lived, which is in a place of Navadvip called Kulia. And Lord Chaitanya heard his explanations from Srimad Bhagavatam. And as he listened, he could understand that this man is explaining everything without a trace of devotion to Krishna. So Lord Chaitanya became very angry. He said, "Who is this rascal who thinks that he could teach Srimad Bhagavatam to others? He is not qualified to speak Bhagavatam. He is not qualified to read Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is the essence of all the Vedas. It deals exclusively with pure unalloyed devotion. It kicks out the concept of artha, kama, dhamma, and even liberation. And he is speaking that the goal of Bhagavatam is liberation? I do not hear even a word of devotion from his mouth." Srimad Bhagavatam is like the most delicious yogurt, dahi. And Shukadev Goswami has churned that yogurt and made it into pure butter. And he has fed it to Maharaj Parikshit, who is eating it to his full satisfaction. Srimad Bhagavatam is non-different than Krishna himself. And Shukadev Goswami, he presented Bhagavatam for only one purpose: to glorify the personality of Krishna and teach unalloyed service to Krishna. But this man, he does not understand. In his birth, he doesn't even have a trace of understanding of what is Bhagavatam. Therefore, all his teaching is simply cheating. And then Lord Chaitanya, who is none different than Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in great anger, transcendental anger, he called out, "I will take his Bhagavatam and I will rip it to pieces." And he started running to Devananda Pandit's ashram. And the devotees somehow or other stopped Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya walked away. One day Lord Chaitanya was walking with Srivas Thakur, and they came across a house of many men who were drinking wine and getting drunk, and they were terribly intoxicated. So Lord Chaitanya was in the mood of Balaram, and he wanted to go in to preach to them. But Srivas Thakur said, "You cannot go in there. What will people say if you go into this house of people who are drinking wine?" And Lord Chaitanya said, "No, I will go where I want to go." And Srivas Thakur said, "But you will lose your reputation. And if people criticize you due to misunderstanding you, that will be worse than death to me. Therefore, my Lord, please know, if you go in that house, I will at this very moment drown myself in the river Ganges." This is the nature of a devotee. A devotee lives only to see the Lord glorified. And there is nothing more painful. Even death is not so painful. Even the most terrible chronic disease is not so painful for a devotee as hearing the Lord or his devotees being criticized or blasphemed. That is unbearable. So when Lord Chaitanya saw Srivasa's very sweet and faithful devotion, he said, "All right, I will not go in the house of the drunkards." But the Lord is in everyone's heart. He is Paramatma. So somehow he induced all the drunkards to come outside. And when they saw him, they said, "Oh, this Nimai Pandit, he is very good. He is always chanting the holy names." And then they all began, in their drunken, intoxicated state, they all began dancing and dancing while chanting the holy names of God. They went on and on following the Lord and very blissfully singing and chanting and dancing. And when Srivas saw this, he began to weep tears of love. What is the mercy and compassion of the Lord? He has transformed these drunkards into devotees by inducing them to chant the holy names. And as Lord Chaitanya bestowed his merciful glance upon all of these drunkards, they became intoxicated, not with wine, but with Krishna prema, and with great enthusiasm they chant the holy name. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare. The Lord does not care what is your past, but if you are simply submissive to receive his mercy, even if you are from the lowest category within human society, Lord Chaitanya will give you the greatest mercy. Seeing the drunkards, Lord Chaitanya began to smile, and he walked on his way. And then he happened to meet Devananda Pandit. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he said, "Aye, Devananda, you come here, you listen to what I have to say." He said, "You are a rascal. You are a nonsense. You do not understand what is Bhagavat and you are preaching Bhagavat. There are two types of Bhagavat. There is the Person Bhagavat and there is the book Bhagavat. The book Bhagavat is non-different than Krishna. It is the literary incarnation of Krishna. And no one, however great or learned or austere one may be, can approach Krishna unless one gets the favor of a devotee. And a person Bhagavat is that devotee who lives his life according to the teachings of Bhagavat. And Srivas is such a person Bhagavat. And you have made an offense to him." When Lord Chaitanya saw Devananda, he remembered the offense. This particular story happened before Lord Chaitanya even manifested his lila of establishing the Sankirtan movement within this world. It happened many, many, many years back. But if you offend a devotee, the Lord never forgets it unless you atone properly for that offense. What happened is this. Devananda Pandit, in his academy, was teaching Srimad Bhagavatam to his many hundreds of students. And in those days, there were so many scholars and so many pundits in Navadvip, but there was hardly any devotees scattered here and there. And the devotees are always eager to hear the wonderful glories of Krishna from Srimad Bhagavatam. Because factually, Srimad Bhagavatam, being the incarnation of Krishna in book form, every word, every syllable is completely concentrated with all the opulence, beauty, and glory of Krishna. And any syllable from the Bhagavatam can invoke ecstatic love of God from the heart if it is heard with submissive, humble heart, and if one gains the favor of the Vaishnavas. Srivas happened to be walking by that place, and he went into the school of Devananda Pandit. And as he was speaking Srimad Bhagavatam, Srivas Thakur began to remember Krishna. Became so engrossed in the Bhagavatam that he went into an ecstatic trance of devotion. Tears began to flow from his eyes. His limbs began to tremble. His hairs began to stand on end. All the 8 symptoms of ecstasy, asta sattvika bhava, became manifest in his body. And he began to cry very loudly. And the students, they had no devotion, nor did they know what is a devotee. They were reading Srimad Bhagavatam simply from an academic point of view. So they considered Srivas to be simply a disturbance to their class. So very rudely, they picked him up and they threw him outside. And Srivas was laying there in the dirt. And then he came back to his external consciousness and he felt very, very bad. And he went home without saying anything. But Lord Chaitanya remembered that offense. And face to face with Devananda Pandit, he said that you are reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, but the Person Bhagavatam came right into your school. The pure devotee of Krishna, who has realized the essence of Bhagavatam. And because you are a fool, you do not understand what is love of God. You have thrown him out, you have abused him, you have manhandled him. Because the Guru is responsible for whatever the disciples do. Your pupils did this, you did not stop him, you are responsible for this offense. And then he said to Devananda Pandit, you have no qualification to recite Bhagavatam. You have no qualification to be a teacher. You are cheating. And Lord Chaitanya walked away. And Devananda Pandit was very embarrassed. And he felt quite sad. But at the same time, he just went home. What could he do? He was such a big, famous scholar, being adored by everyone. Soon after this, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas. He left Navadvip and he traveled to Jagannath Puri to make his residence.
You were listening to Radhanath Swami on devotionalnectar.com.